this very, very normal political year, where nothing strange is happening at all, you decided that you would write a fantastic book, which I'm going through. I'm lucky enough to be reading through right now. And in the end, I think what you're doing in your book is somewhat more plausible than what we're actually all living through right now.
Yeah, Law and Disorder, Cliff, I wrote for a lot of reasons, but one of them is, I've been, as you know, you and I have been doing media together for 17 years on and off, and in there you learn all the political stories and you learn all the political backstories. Law and Disorder it's a thriller, it's a legal thriller, and what it does is it takes all those parts and it weaves into like the headlines, the news feed of the day, ties it into a story, but it's the same news feed we've always heard about. It is corporate America gone crazy. It is controlled by the oligarchs in the U.S. It has all those parts, but it's weaved into a thriller.
Yeah, well, and obviously they always say write about what you know. So obviously I started looking through it, seeing some of the similarities. Nicholas Dichotomus, who has a bit of a name. One could say a Greek-sounding name like yours.
Actually, I'm Italian, but I'm Italian, but it does sound correct.
Mistake.
Yeah.
I'm like Donald Trump. I'm not politically correct. You know that. Okay, so let's try part two. But this part I know. Tough-minded lawyer from Florida, Pensacola area, who takes on corporations and really isn't scared of anyone. That to me sounds a lot like you.
Well, the cases in there, Cliff, they're true. I mean, the cases that are talked about, they've been made into, as I say, a thriller with a murder involved. But it's impossible to write a novel and not have some parts of yourself involved. But actually, the main characters, though, Cliff, are really a composite of some of the best trial lawyers that I've worked with over the last 35 years that have handled. These aren't lawyers who handle single event auto cases. These are lawyers who handle the biggest mass tort cases, the biggest criminal defense cases there in the country. And so that's kind of the composite of Nicholas Dichotomus, and the rest of the characters are somewhat composites as well. But I think the main reason, the reason I think it's an unusual novel is that, you get to sit on a beach and read a story that hopefully keeps you entertained and it keeps the pages turning. But when you come away, you say, well, I really didn't know that about the Koch brothers. I really didn't know that about the pharmaceutical industry. I had no idea that the FDA was so dysfunctional. I had no idea that the EPA was so dysfunctional. So, or the justice system. I had no idea that it's been so packed with conservative right-wing judges for the last 30 years.
Well, and seriously, I hope you didn't take that the wrong way. My only point was, you know this territory. I've worked with you. I've been on your political show. I've worked with you doing some work for the National Trial Lawyers, an organization you're the president of. When it comes to trial law, it comes to taking on big companies, when it comes to any political issue of the day, what's going on in anywhere from Congress to Tallahassee, this is your area, and, let me compliment you for a second, because I tend to like books that combine some of these various elements. There's thrillers, but if you love the political world and the legal world, and so in a way, it reminds you that way of some of the things like what John Grisham has done, because you know when you read him, he served in the Mississippi State House. He's a guy that's a lawyer, and so he knows the world of politics. He knows the world of law, and so he knows what he's talking about, and he brings in these characters that you might believe are larger than life, but then you see, when you go out and you live life as we have in this world, again, I think everybody's getting a case of it right now with Donald Trump, you see that these types of characters, be they good or nefarious, they're out there. And that's what I find that you do in this book also.
Yeah, I
think it makes it really fascinating.
Well, thank you, Cliff. It's a series of 3 books. The idea is, listen, if any of those stories that were told in there, and by the way, they're all true except for the murder part. But if I were to call NBC or CBS today and I said, listen, I have a story about a drug that's killed 1,000 women last year, and I have the documents where they admit that they killed 1,000 women unnecessarily with a defective drug, would you please do the story? And they would say, no, we can't do the story because our advertisers won't let us. That's propaganda media. And so propaganda media has overtaken corporate media. These stories that I'll be talking about in these books are all true. These are actually cases that I've handled and friends of mine have handled. And the truth is, when you read them, you go, my God, that can't be true. Well, they are true. And the problem is corporate media will not tell them because you have some cat on the 50th floor with an MBA saying you may not tell the story because we'll lose an advertiser if you do that. It's the state of modern media right now, Cliff. And so you have to get them the way that you get at them. You go after them through social media very effectively. This is another iteration of that. How do you tell the stories in a way that people might actually hear it and remember it and do something about it?
Well, yeah, and that's what I've always loved. You've never backed down, and some of the guys who, I've met at these conferences you throw through the National Trial Lawyers who are willing to stand up and take on some of these guys who at these corporations, and that is a very interesting thing, that you bring up here, which is we're all watching it with this presidential election right now, and after in a little bit we can talk somewhat about that too. But when you see that it's not just about which candidate or whatever, it's how much they choose to cover a particular story or not cover it,
right?
Ignore it, know. And you've been on these. I think of a movie like The Insider, and this reminds me of that too, where you're trying to tell a story about tobacco, and corporate goes to the news people 60 Minutes and says, we can't risk a lawsuit. We don't want to lose the advertising. And, I mean, again, you see it again and again. You've been involved, as you said, in these pharmaceutical cases, tobacco, oil, God knows how many others. And this seems to be a real problem in our democracy right now. There are just certain stories that, at least in the biggest networks, cannot be told.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I don't see any change taking place. When you did your book on McCain, I thought it was interesting that you did take a little bit of a take on how difficult it was to get the real story about John McCain out there. Your book did that, but before your book, nobody knew those stories. And so the problem is social media or radio programs just like this. It's gotten to the point to where you have millennials that have so much faith in this alternative media. They have so much faith in it, and they should. They should have faith in it because they realize that corporate media is no longer anything. It's unrecognizable as journalism. In 1985, there were, I think, 55, almost 60 independent news organizations that delivered the magazines and newspapers and radio and television. Today, there are 4. Arguably, in a perfect world, you could say there are 5. So all of that becomes the clearinghouse for every bit of information that people read. And so Grisham, as you pointed out, tells stories, hopefully the same way that I told stories here, that you read and you go, my God, I can't believe the justice system is in that bad a shape. I can't believe that this regulator actually did that. I can't believe that politics and government made a trade-off for consumers' lives in exchange for money. So all of those things are part of Law and Disorder, and they'll be part of the second and the third book as well, where these characters are rounded out even more and new stories are told.